Hello, Jill. Welcome to the podcast. Thanks for coming on.
Hey, thank you for having me.
I'm excited to talk to you today. You're a very interesting person, and we're going to be discussing something that we haven't spoken about on this podcast yet, which is addiction, sobriety, and recovery. And you're a biochemist by trade and by profession, and you're sober since 2019, and you've got this amazing podcast called Sober Powered, where you really go into the details of, the various biochemistry and all the different aspects of alcoholism and addiction in general, and sort of really just helping people navigate sobriety or understand what's going on. And it's really cool. And so congratulations to you for that and the success that you've had. It's awesome.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And thanks for having me on to talk about this.
Yeah, I mean, it's such a huge topic, right? And I think that especially at the moment where with everything that's been happening in the last 18 months, I think that there's really been an increase in sort of substance use for a lot of people. And it's something that's, a real part of a lot of people's lives. And, many haven't yet come to terms with it. Some are coming to terms with it. Other people are already, 40 or 50 or 70 years sober. And, there's a whole world out there for people to learn about and to understand. And it's something that, is really interesting because it defies a little bit of like rational thinking a lot of the time. And so it is difficult to understand unless, someone like you sort of come from within inside can be like, yeah, well, here's exactly what was happening when that was going on, right? But so how about we sort of just start off with, if we could go into your story a little bit, if you don't mind, like what drove you to sobriety? Why did you sort of, what made you reach that point? What was your journey like?
Yeah, so when I was growing up, I actually thought that it was a choice and it was something that people did because they didn't want to face their lives and improve them. So yeah, if you don't have that direct experience with it, you just pick up the judgment that most of us have. And then I only learned when I started dealing with it myself. But so I didn't drink until after college, actually. So I was bullied for all of middle and high school, and I never had any friends. And because of that, I was never invited to parties. So I was really protected from high school drinking. And then when I went to college, I was kind of weird from 8 years of constant bullying. So it was hard for me to put myself out there because I just expected rejection at that point. So I was very shy and I studied and kept to myself. And then it wasn't until after college that I started getting interested in drinking. And that was because I went to graduate school and everybody else drank except me. And from the bullying, I had this drive, like, I want people to like me. And I thought if I drank like them, they would like me. So I just started ordering what other people were ordering because I didn't know what to do. And then the first time I got like that real buzz on, I remember I was like, okay, this is why people do this and, embarrass themselves and feel terrible. I see the reason, I understand. And I had no control at all, like from the very beginning. And I had no understanding of like how much alcohol was enough. I thought like if I had a drink and I wasn't like instantly drunk, then I was okay to keep drinking more. So because of that, and because of being in the one more club, I was constantly just having one more drink, and I would get sick. I would get like really drunk and embarrass myself. And I started like shaming myself for it pretty early on. And I thought like something was wrong with me because I couldn't control it. Mm-hmm. And then within like a year, I was a daily drinker because I was learning like when you had stress in school, if you drank, then your stress would go away.
Right.
And it does.
Yeah.
Alcohol makes stress go away.
It's magic.
So, yeah. Just saves it, pushes it off. But because I had so much stress, I just drank every day because it helps stress, right?
Yeah.
And then it wasn't until year 2 of drinking that I realized like I had something going on. And that was because my tolerance doubled. So I was a teacher for about 5 years, and I used to go to work, and teaching is one of the most stressful jobs that you can do.
Oh, yeah.
And not a good place for a problem drinker. And I would come home and I would make these Cosmos, and it was in a pint glass, and it was like 85% vodka.
Yeah.
And then like,
that's strong.
I don't know, 10 more percent like triple sec, and like a splash of like diet cranberry juice.
God
and
damn,
halfway,
that's a drink,
yeah, that was one drink.
Yeah.
And halfway through the school year, though, I started having 2 a night. And when I started doing that, I realized, like, okay, you shouldn't be drinking this much alcohol, like this kind of a lot. And I was getting drunk, like, on school nights, and it was awful. So that's when I started trying to moderate. Mm-hmm. And I thought, okay, let's just have less. Let's just drink less, and then we'll be good. And I couldn't drink less. And no matter what I tried to get my husband to help me by like literally babysitting me. I would try with I would wear rubber bands on my wrist that would signal the amount of drinks that I was allowed to have. And I would take one off. I had like apps to track how many drinks I had. I set a limit for the week, and my limit for the week was like 30 drinks. It wasn't even like moderation for a woman is like 7.
Yeah.
But mine was like 30.
Yeah.
And I would get to like halfway through the week, and I'd already be at 30 weeks, and I'd be like, oh, damn. Okay, well, if I just start the week on Friday, then I'll be... So I tried all of these things for 5 years, and no matter what I tried, none of these strategies worked. And I used to research how to moderate your drinking, how to drink less. And I thought, like, if I could just practice stopping enough, I could learn how to do it, like, by choice. So I would buy like a special amount of alcohol, and that was all I could have for the night, and I couldn't have any more because there was nothing else in the house. And that's not really like starting and stopping. That's no choice.
Right.
It was just a big mess. But what started happening is my mental health got really bad. So 2 years before I quit, I developed anxiety. And I used to, like, you drink and then you kind of pass out, and then you jolt awake at like 2 or 3 a.m. and then the anxiety would start. And I would be up like for most of the night with really bad anxiety. Like the room would zoom out, and I would just feel crazy and like hyperactive, and I couldn't calm down. And then so depression is something that I do struggle with normally. Anxiety isn't. And my depression started getting worse because I hated myself so much for not being able to have 2 drinks or 3 drinks or whatever. When I would have 6, I would beat the crap out of myself all night. Like, you're such a loser. You're the worst person ever. Why are you so weak? Why can't you control yourself? What's wrong with you? And that started to get worse too. And that eventually became suicidal thoughts. So because I hated myself so much because I couldn't control the amount that I was drinking, I started thinking just these really scary things, like thinking that I shouldn't put my husband through this, that I should set him free. He doesn't deserve this. And setting him free wasn't like leaving him. It was like getting rid of myself.
Yeah.
And I used to wake up every morning and I would be doing my makeup for work. And so this was towards the end when I switched back to lab work. And I would look myself in the mirror and just like repeat, I hate you, like over and over and over. And I would like make myself cry like all the time. Yeah, it was really nasty. And I did that every day for months. And then one day, it was just like some random Saturday, I got super drunk because we used to start at brunch. And so when you start at 11 and then you just keep going, you get like pretty drunk. And I like didn't sleep the whole night because the anxiety started, and then the suicidal thoughts started. And then I remember I was sitting watching the sun come up with my husband, who used to always take care of me and try to help me. And I said, like, I can't drink for 90 days. And I don't know why I said 90. I think just because like it felt like a lot. Yeah. Like a month didn't feel like a lot. Even though I'd done like, you know, no days. Yeah. I was still drinking every day. So I actually did the 90 days, but my motivation wasn't like getting sober and living a better life and like being happier. My motivation was to cure myself so I could moderate.
Right. You white-knuckled it 90 days.
I did, yeah. And I was so miserable the whole time. And I thought if I could just like take a break, I'd be able to, I don't know. It was crazy. You go a little bit crazy when you're like your mental state gets really disrupted. And so I remember like day 2, I didn't feel suicidal anymore and I didn't have any more anxiety. And it continued like that for the whole 90 days. And like I felt so empowered that I didn't have suicidal thoughts anymore. I actually like got a tattoo to represent like overcoming those thoughts. But I was still planning to moderate after the 90 days, and I found out day 91 was actually going to be my birthday. So I thought it was like a sign, like the universe was saying like, you did the right thing, you're going to moderate now, like you're going to drink, it's going to be great. And I drank on my birthday, got super drunk. Yeah. But then I did moderate. I moderated for 2 months for the first time ever. Okay. And it wasn't like 30 drinks a week moderation. I had 2. And I wasn't even like, like white knuckling it or like making any rules. I just had 2 drinks on Saturday night when we would go out on a date, and I didn't have any more and I didn't want any more. And I was the happiest like drinker ever. I was like, I'm cured. I did it. Can't believe it. This is everything I wanted. And then we went on a cruise and we had the drink package, but it was a special occasion, which was, you know, you can drink. Yeah. So doesn't everybody just go on vacation and then they drink from the minute they wake up to the minute they go to bed? Right? You're just supposed to.
I mean, I suppose some people do that.
Or is it just me?
No, there's a lot of people who are like that. That's for sure.
Yeah, so that's what I did. Yeah. And I was like, okay, we're going to live it up, do the vacation thing, come home, moderate. And I humiliated myself so many times on that vacation. Oh, dear. It was so bad. And it was my first time in Europe, and like I totally ruined it. I climbed up Mount Vesuvius with a hangover of death.
What a terrible thing that you put yourself through. Just
it was so sad.
Like, I couldn't imagine anything worse when you're feeling hungover than going and just being like, I'm going to hike a mountain today. You know? Just like, yeah, why not? Casual.
In the sun with no shade.
Oh, boy. It gets worse.
Yeah, right? So then I came home and I couldn't moderate anymore. And I was right back to every single day, absolutely no control. Have one drink till I go to sleep. Hating myself. Anxiety came back. suicidal thoughts came back, and I suffered like that for 4 more months. And then I had the same kind of experience where it was just a random Saturday, and I had been drinking all day, and I didn't sleep. And I realized, like, when you drink, you feel suicidal. And when you don't drink, because I had that 90-day experience, you don't feel suicidal. And sometimes my husband will go away on like motorcycle trips or something, and I'm alone. And I realize, like, I could be feeling this way alone. And I felt really afraid. Mm-hmm. And I thought, like, drunk Gill, that's my drunk alter ego, drunk Gill could like get really drunk and do something crazy. And that's not like how I actually feel for real. And then I never drank again. And that was the end of it. So that, like, that time off, even though I white knuckled it and, like, you know, didn't really enjoy it that much, it taught me a lot. And without that, like, I never would have. The whole thing is like acceptance. Yeah. I never would have reached that point without that 90 days.
Wow. I mean, that's a hell of a story. And did you go to like an AA group or anything like that? Or were you doing it through it by yourself? Or how did you sort of navigate that once you decided to quit?
Yeah. So I was really scared to put myself out there. I'm sure, I was afraid of judgment, which is silly because everyone's there for the same reason that I would be.
And look at you now.
Yeah, right? Yeah. Now everybody knows. So I didn't do anything. So the first 4 months of my sobriety were like normal life. And then month like 4 was when quarantine started. And I thought, like, this is a good opportunity to go to therapy virtually. So I've been in therapy ever since. And then I started attending AA on Sundays, I think like 6 weeks ago. So I do that every Sunday. And yeah, it's really nice. It's a whole different crew than the people that you encounter like on Instagram. Instagram people are more like 20s and some like early 30s, but AA is like a wide range of people. And I remember there was one woman who had 59 years of sobriety, and yeah, you don't encounter those people very often, but they're hanging out in AA with tons of wisdom.
Yeah. And it just also goes to show how it's really a lifetime thing that people deal with. It doesn't just go away. And, you know, from my non-clinical experience of it, from what I've seen, it's like the people who sort of go to AA and then stop going end up in trouble. You know, and it's like that's something that just keeps people going. But it isn't necessarily the way for everyone. And, you know, some people don't do it and they're fine. And so it's whatever works for you. But it does seem to have amazing results for people, you know, for a lot of people. And, you know, these mutual aid groups, it's an amazing thing that sort of has been developed, right, out of this need for it. But just to take it back a second, like, what's interesting to me about your story, well, a lot of things, but firstly, how for you, like, once it was on, right? Like, once you had started drinking, you were like, I'm in, right? You were like, this is awesome. I mean, it didn't...
Let's go.
Yeah, it didn't turn out to be that way, sort of in the long run, you know, for all the reasons that you said, but really, like, from the beginning, you were like, I get it, right? And your whole sort of process of attempting to moderate seems to me like an attempt to be like, well, I you know, really love the feeling that I get, or what it seems to do for me, and I don't want to get rid of that, or I'm scared to get rid of that, and so I need to just figure out a way to incorporate it into my life, or like daily or weekly or whatever it is, so that I can still have it and not have to go completely sober. And yet, you know, as you found out, like, moderation doesn't work if you've got the genetics for addiction or whatever it is, right? Which is a very interesting topic, because it's so fascinating how it's something that just like takes over, right? and you, as you say, like once you start, like you can't stop, and there's almost nothing you can do about it until you reach a point where you make this like real decision to do something different, right? And so that it's a really interesting balance. And was that your experience of it as well? Did I sort of read that correctly?
Yeah, so we all have our own like rock bottom kind of moment that shocks you out of denial and obsession, and like what you said about moderation, trying to find a way to keep it in my life and like incorporate it. When you're like in a problem, you give up everything. Like even if you're not a daily drinker like I was, you still create a life around your drinking. So if you try to change that, there's like nothing else there. Like I didn't do anything else. I just drank alcohol, felt like crap after, and then thought about drinking again, or hated myself for it. But you don't like, you don't have a life.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And you think it's like the most important thing ever. Like how would I unwind after work? How would I deal with stress? How would I celebrate? How would I go on vacation? Like it becomes essential for like literally everything that you do. So it's hard to give it up. Like my husband is a social drinker. He can just like decide to not drink, and it's like, who cares? And I couldn't do that. I have to decide to like, I can never drink ever again. And that's the only way I can't.
Yeah. And that's hard because you do see it in other people being different, and you're like, well, then that must be something wrong with me. Because clearly other people can do it. Like, lots of people, I mean, you can see it with lots of things. Like I know tons of people who will do that with all kinds of substances. And, there's a lot of others that are like, I can't do that. Like just once and I'm off the rail, and it's just a shit show for, lack of a better way of explaining it. And it's very fascinating. And I guess, did this lead you into your like research into addiction and, trying to understand more about yourself and why this is the case, and, the sort of genetic and biological components to it? Was that the sort of driving factor in it?
Yeah, I wanted to understand if all those horrible things that I thought about myself were true, because I have the example of someone who can drink however much they want and stop. And my husband could party with me, and then he would switch to water and I wouldn't. And I wanted to understand, like, is he good and I'm bad? Am I weak? And like, if I were a stronger person, I'd be better. So that was my motivation, like trying to understand, like, is there actually something wrong with who I am? Or is this like, there's something going on in my brain that's out of my control? So I guess releasing myself from shame was the motivation.
Yeah, shame's a real bitch. I mean,
yeah,
it'll drive you to do some crazy things. And I've actually been thinking about just shame in general as a concept recently. So it's interesting that it's sort of come up now, because it's really weird how it operates, because it seems to be a projection of our own judgments of ourselves onto other people judging us. So it's like, oh, I think that you're judging me for what I perceive as my own bad quote unquote bad behavior, in the sense of like, I don't like what I'm doing for whatever reason, but I'm still doing it. And so I think that you're the one who's going to be judging me. And so there's that internal shame that comes up. I mean, sure, sometimes there's people who will actually, outwardly shame you. But I mean, those people are, dealing with shit themselves, and it's mostly not personal. Or if it is, fuck them. It's not many, and they're not the people you want in your life. But it's very strange, and it will drive you to do crazy things, right? And I mean, even people have been driven to suicide, at least in part because of that, and it's terrible. But it's such a real and prevalent human emotion for everyone, probably, and it just depends on sort of how it manifests in you individually, and how you learn to deal with it in terms of when you have these feelings. Like, do they overwhelm you? Can you manage them? Do you suppress them? Do you express them? And that's the sort of like navigation of emotions in general. But shame and guilt are two of the big ones, right? Like feeling bad for whatever you've done. And then the real silver lining is when you feel bad about feeling bad. That's when it really gets interesting, and that's a fun part of depression as well. I don't mean that for real. It's not fun, but it's a really strange manifestation to just get stuck in that loop of like, I feel bad and I feel bad for feeling bad, and I'm going to beat myself up for feeling bad and make myself feel worse, and nothing happens. No resolution comes up. It doesn't serve any purpose seemingly other than to just create more suffering. And yet when you're in it, and you just don't see out of it until it gets to a certain point of severity, or someone who you trust or something like that can sort of point you in the right direction to seeing it from a different perspective, like a therapist or a sponsor or a friend even, or a loved one. I mean, could be anyone, but you have to be willing to sort of also open up and accept that that's kind of what's happening, right? And so, in terms of like, we were talking about so you were studying like the different aspects of addiction, right? And you were wanting to know why your husband is cool as a social drinker and you can't do that, right? And so what are the sort of like main findings of that? Like, I mean, I know that, now I suppose you'll say that there's people who have genetic predispositions towards addiction, and for them, when something kicks it on, it's on, and other people don't. But why is that the case?
Yeah, there's so much that goes into it, and there isn't just like one gene that does it. It's like a combination. So you have a bunch of things, a bunch of different genetics and your experiences that all come together and increase or decrease your risk. Mm-hmm. And some people's brains are more susceptible to changes from alcohol and drugs than others. So like your reward system can adapt to find alcohol even more pleasurable. So then you keep adapting, and it's like, it's already the best thing ever. And then it just gets like better and better. Whereas other people, there won't be a change there no matter how much they drink. And I think the most empowering thing for me that I realized was like, alcohol doesn't feel the same for everyone. Because I couldn't understand like when someone would leave half a drink at the bar, or like my husband does that sometimes, like, you don't want to finish your drink?
Yeah. Are you crazy?
And, or like when people wouldn't want to drink like all the time, I couldn't understand it. And that's because for me, alcohol feels like the best thing ever. There's no better feeling than having a drink, or like even knowing that like if you just order a drink, even knowing the drink is like coming, that's right. Even like
that anticipation, excitement.
Yeah. But for social drinkers, it feels fine. And like, that's it.
Yeah.
And that's why they don't want to drink 1,000 drinks. And, there are other things. I think a cool one is like, so the reason that alcohol feels good is because it causes the release of endorphins in the brain. And we don't all have the same like levels of endorphins naturally. So some people have an average level, and they'll have a drink and their endorphins will kind of stay like average. But there are other people who have very low levels of endorphins, and they might experience depression or something. And then they have a drink and their endorphin levels shoot up above average. So they're feeling like amazing, and they could have had the same alcohol as someone else with average levels of endorphins, and they just feel like the same.
Right.
So like, it's the way that it feels for people. It's not like you are too weak to handle your problems or you're too weak to control yourself. It just feels so good. And it causes like changes in the brain that make you not be able to to like think clearly, even though you think like, I gotta drive home, I should probably stop drinking. You can have that thought, but it doesn't like go anywhere. It doesn't like go to your reward center and be like, okay, chill, man. Like your reward center is just like one more, like, let's go one more.
Yeah.
And that's like the only thing that matters. So there's different like ways that our brain like communicates with itself. There's a lot going into it. And a simple one too is like, on the biological side, like how you even process alcohol. So if I process alcohol quickly and efficiently, that means when I drink, I don't get tired, I don't get a headache, I don't feel like anything negative. So because I feel great while I drink, I'm going to drink more often. Where my husband drinks and he starts getting tired and like getting a headache within a couple hours. So why would he drink as much if he knows he's going to get tired? Like alcohol energized me. Like it was only positives in the first like 2 hours, and then it was all negatives. But yeah, there's so much, and it's just really cool. And like, even if you have these susceptibilities, like alcohol can change your brain to make them even worse. And like trauma comes into it. And if like you never learn how to deal with anything, it's way more likely you're going to become dependent on alcohol or some other substance to like help your life.
Regulate your emotions.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I mean, I'm, for better or worse, I suppose, I'm one of the people who alcohol doesn't agree with me. I don't like it. I mean, I've drank before and, it's fine. And I do drink occasionally, not anymore, because I'm like, why am I even doing this? Like, it's because I like the idea more than the experience of it. And then for whatever, it's actually, I mean, I know why. My whole family is like that. And, none of my parents are drinkers, and none of their parents drank either. And I think it's mostly all for the same reason, where for me, it's just like when I drink, I'm like, I feel pretty good for a few minutes, and then it takes a real like deep dive off the cliff, and then I feel like really bad for a long time. Often, it could be even like a day, the next day, even after just like a few drinks, I'll feel like more depressed and, unmotivated or demotivated, and just, I don't want to do anything. And, that happens almost every time. And so for me, like alcohol doesn't give me that kick, right? But like something like weed or like cannabis does, right? And for other people, I see like it doesn't. And so it's very interesting to see how it affects people differently in terms of, their setup, and why, different substances affect people differently. And then having that disposition towards addiction or dependence, or however you want to phrase it, it's like, well, that puts you in, various at-risk categories now all of a sudden as well, where it's like, yeah, but there's these consequences that come with it, right? But it is, and the biology is fascinating, and humans are extremely complex creatures, and, the manifestation of how we exist is so vast and varied, although there are lots of patterns that you can pick up and apply to, groups of people. It's like there'll be so much variation in how things present, and that's a sort of, I guess, an evolutionary thing, just in terms of like survival, where you don't want one thing to be able to take out everybody. Like that wouldn't be very good. But alcohol seems to be a big thing for a lot of people. I mean, it is embedded in just about every human culture in most of human history to some degree or other, right? And even today, like, it's such a huge part of most people's lives that not being a drinker, because either you're doing it by choice, I mean, it's always by choice, but I mean, if you're doing it because you don't like alcohol, or if you're doing it because you're sober, it's like it does feel, or it can feel like you're different than most people, but it's probably not true. It's just everyone's sort of caught up in this business of like the social gatherings, and it is what do they call it? A social lubricant. It does like lower people's inhibitions, and so they feel better when they're trying to, meet new people or, meet potential partners and things like that. Like it helps people deal with the anxiety and that stuff. And I mean, is that a good thing or a bad thing? I don't know, but it just kind of is, right? And it's so much accepted as a part of society that it's hard to, to have a different take on it. At least it seems that way when you're younger. But as you sort of like get older, you're like, oh no, most people don't give a fuck what you're doing. And if they do, like, don't worry about it. I mean, find better people. If they're that concerned about what you're doing with your time or whatever, you sort of just need to do what makes you feel happiest and the best for you, right? But it does come with a lot of changes. Like, did you have to, when you got sober, did you have to have different friends, and did it impact your life like quite a lot in that way? Like, did you have to make big changes?
Yeah, so my life was 100% alcohol. Mm-hmm. That was like all that mattered. I only made friends with people. They didn't necessarily like have a problem themselves, but they maybe just enjoyed binge drinking.
They were into it.
Yeah, so I could go out with them and we could just like really party. Mm-hmm. And maybe they didn't realize that I was like kind of doing that every day. But I would only make friends with people that would do what I wanted to do, which was drink.
Sure.
And if someone, like I met someone who didn't like alcohol, I would be like, what, weirdo? Like, what? You don't like it? I would like, that person's boring, and all this stuff. And I would never hang out with them. Like that just wouldn't be a friendship. So when you stop drinking and you're only friends with people that either have a problem or want to binge drink, and now you don't drink at all, like there's a problem there. Yeah. So I lost a lot of friends. I stopped getting invited to parties, and I can see now in the beginning, like that really hurt. Mm-hmm. And I thought that was like, see, this is what happens. You get sober and everybody just thinks you're a loser. No one wants to hang out with you. And now looking back, they were either doing it because they didn't want to invite me to a drinking party knowing I was sober. Yeah. They didn't want to trigger me, so they were trying to be nice. Or they, were just like me and had, like, why would I want to hang out with a sober person who's happy when I'm, like, drinking and miserable? So I can see, like, kind of their perspective now. But, a lot of changes. I'm actually trying to tackle something right now. When I used to drink, cooking was always a huge passion of mine. Like I have cookbooks and I love like the Food Network, and I love to try new recipes and like research different cuisines and ingredients. And when I stopped drinking, I basically 100% stopped cooking. Mm-hmm. And I just kind of made that connection this weekend. Like I was saying, you're lazy, like takeout is so easy. Why don't you just cook? But cooking feels more like a chore now. It's not like a fun experience, where with alcohol, like there's a whole ritual. Like you get the drink, you put the music, you match the wine to the food. So you have to relearn like everything. Like what do you do when you get home from work and you're stressed out? Like then what do you do? Yeah. So you have to just like change your whole life. But the positive thing is like now I can have a life. Before I didn't have one. I just like sat around and drank and like watched The Bachelor and did nothing. So now I can do like whatever I want. You just have to take time to figure out like what that is. Like what do you actually like? Who are you even?
Right. So how long was it after you stopped drinking this last time that you sort of realized that like this was a good decision for you? Like was there a period of, I don't want to say withdrawal necessarily, but was there like an adjustment period that was rough that you had to get through before you sort of started to say, oh no, this was a good choice, and it's having like really positive benefits for me?
Yeah, good question. So like the 90 days when all the mental health things went away, I had the same experience. So right away, didn't feel suicidal anymore, didn't have anxiety anymore. I had a lot of trouble sleeping. That's a common symptom when you stop drinking. But I wasn't intentionally keeping myself up with anxiety or thinking that I was the worst loser ever. So automatically I was thrilled, and I thought it was great. It got hard around 6 months, between like 6 and 9 months of sobriety, because like all those good things kind of even out.
Right.
And not feeling suicidal is like your norm now. You know, it's not like exciting anymore. Yeah. It's just like, oh, I still don't feel suicidal. Like, woohoo.
Yeah. That's fun.
But yeah. So it's exciting in the beginning, like all the positives that are happening, and like you feel better, your skin might be getting better, your relationships are better, your job is better, but then it evens out, and then you're happy and life is good, but then you still can't drink. And that's when I really started grieving it, around like 6 months. They call it like the pink cloud. Yeah. It's when like sobriety is the best thing ever. Like, why wouldn't everybody want to do this? And then you fall off the pink cloud and you're like, oh, okay, well, now, you know, maybe I wasn't that bad. And that's like when those weird thoughts creep up. So I think that was the hardest stage for me. And then now, approaching 2 years, it'll be 2 years in November, I'm having those weird thoughts. And that just shows you like addiction is permanent. And my brain is like, well, it's been 2 years. Like, maybe you weren't even that bad. I mean, look at some of your friends. They were so much worse than you. And like, maybe you can drink socially. Are you really never going to drink for 60 years? So like, you're constantly having these thoughts, and it's weird. And I can have them and be like, you are a crazy person. Like, who thinks that? Who thinks that? Right. But it's still hard. And that's why I started going to AA, because I thought like a little extra support might be helpful. And it did help.
Was it helping you?
Yeah, so just seeing like people that I've never met before, because I've had sober friends for a while, and like they get it, but meeting new people and people who feel exactly the same way as you is really powerful. Yeah. So I think anytime like things get weird is the time to go get a little bit extra support. Definitely. AA or, you know, whatever else.
Yeah, and the support is out there, and you know, people are out there and willing and able to give help, right? And it's terrible to be in that place where you feel alone and that no one else gets it, or it's just me and I suck and whatever it is, and that there's no point of reaching out or trying or any of that kind of thing. And it's, you know, it's really like torturous to yourself to do that, and unnecessary, but you know, you don't know what you don't know, unfortunately. And then it does take, you know, the courage or whatever it is to try it and just be like, let's just see. And, you know, and there's always the possibility that it isn't what you think it's going to be, but it might help in other ways, or this particular group you don't particularly vibe with for some reason. And then you have to go back and reevaluate and be like, okay, let me try again with a different group. Or, you know, it's the same thing with a therapist. It's like, you know, you get up all this courage to be like, I'm going to start therapy, and then you have a therapist that you just don't click with for whatever reason, and then it's easy to be like, oh, well, fuck all therapy. It's all the same, right? That didn't help. I couldn't do anything. But really, it was just a mismatch on, you know, for whatever reason. And it's got no reflection, bears no reflection necessarily either on you or the therapist, just that there's just no necessary good connection, which you need for it to be a really good therapeutic relationship, right? And I would imagine it's a similar sort of thing with like finding a mutual aid group that you jive with and that really you feel like home, and that it helps you and you love the people there, and it's, you know, beneficial and giving you that support that you need. And so, you know, kudos to you for that. I mean, it's really difficult, and from what you've been saying, it's been a hell of a struggle for you, you know. And anyone that sort of reaches the point of suicidality, it's like, it's serious business, you know. It's not something, I mean, I know we're, you know, speaking about it and making jokes and things like that, but really it is pretty serious to get to that point, because what else is there in terms of ruining life for yourself, right? Like that's the end of it. I mean, you can bring lots of pain and suffering to those around you, but like that's probably going to be the worst of it. And also for yourself, I mean, it's just a sad an unfortunate place that many people go through and reach. And it's a very strange part of our psychology that we even reach those, that we're even able to reach those points, right? The sort of like self-destruct mechanism that's inbuilt, that you just, if you suffer enough, something inside of you just goes, no more. And the easiest way to do that is suicide. It's not the best way to do it. I don't recommend it to anyone, but it certainly feels like an option for people, right? When you're heavily depressed and for whatever reason. And so, you know, I mean, to me, it's amazing how after like 2 days of sobriety, that went away for you. Like that's crazy to me. Not in a, I don't believe you, just in a sense of like, I mean, I would have thought like, I mean, it's got to take a couple weeks, you know, like surely there's got to be some adjustment period, but I mean, it's better that it doesn't, right? Like you wouldn't want it to continue unnecessarily. But was that like, so was that your, what you would consider your like rock bottom, right? Was those kind of thoughts and that situation that you were in?
Yeah, so I've had a few moments in my life that were probably somebody else's rock bottom, but they weren't good enough for me.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, I had to hit the same one twice. So it was those suicidal thoughts. And so I hit it, and then I saw that they went away. And that's not like everybody's experience that they would go away that quickly. It depends, you know, on who you are and like how much you drink. Like I was drinking a lot. Like I was getting like really crazy. There was like some weird auditory like hallucinations sometimes. Like I was getting really weird at the end.
You were real deep in if you're getting hallucinations, right?
Yeah, I was hardcore.
Yeah.
Too hardcore. I gotta just never drink ever again. But yeah, so my rock bottom was realizing, I think, that I could do something about these thoughts.
Right.
I think that was it. And feeling fear, because a lot of people feel suicidal because of their drinking, but they don't understand. Like a lot of us, I think people in general, but we struggle from this thing, terminal uniqueness, where we think like our struggles are our own and no one will understand.
Yeah.
No one has ever struggled how we have struggled. And I believed that, and that fueled the shame. Like, why do I feel suicidal? I'm such a loser. And then I started sharing, and so many people were like, oh my God, I feel suicidal too when I drink. And I didn't know that that was a connection. So that's why listening to this podcast is so important, because you might realize like, wow, you had the same experience I had, and it's not uncommon. Like none of my experiences are unique. Not even like the embarrassing ones that I shame myself about. Somebody somewhere has done the same exact thing.
Yeah.
And
Probably
that's
lots
really,
of people.
Yeah, right? And that's really, it's helpful to know that you're not alone.
Definitely. Shout out to Sober Powered. That's your podcast.
Thank you.
It's great. I've listened. It's a really wonderful way that you've done it. And it's also done magnificently well in terms of, you know, the sort of listening success of it. But it's all real, you know. That's how it comes across. It doesn't come across as fabricated or something you're trying to do to impress or to make a point or to do anything like that. It's just like, here's my experience, here's what I've learned, here's what I've looked up, that kind of stuff. And it's just like, you know, use this as you wish kind of information, which I think is the best way to do it, because at least that's the best way I like to hear things. It's not, you know, it's not like lectured at you kind of thing, which I think, I mean, that helps some people, right? As we were saying, humans are varied and different things work for different people. And some people respond super well to the like heavy discipline, like aggressive way of like doing things. And I don't know, good for them, I suppose, but it's not for me. And I guess not for all the other, you know, thousands of listeners that you got on your show. So you're doing something right, that's for sure.
Thank you.
At what point did you start the podcast? Like what made you decide to do that?
Yeah, so I was 7 or 8 months sober. So I had been reading about addiction science since like day 2. like I started right away trying to discover, like, was this my fault?
Yeah.
And I woke up one day, I had been like reading and like writing on my own. And I woke up one morning and I was like, I gotta tell like everybody about this. Like everyone in the world needs to know this.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, I could start a YouTube, but I'm really shy and I don't know how to do anything with cameras, and I don't know how to edit video, and that feels like a lot. And I was like, I could do a blog, but like, I don't know, that doesn't feel so exciting. And then I was like, I'm gonna do a podcast.
Yeah.
And yeah, I launched it the same day. Like I didn't.
Wow.
I'm not fancy. I was like, everyone's got to know this. Okay, now they know.
Yeah.
I told them. And yeah, that's it.
That's awesome. But I mean, that's great. And it worked out well, right? I mean, it just happened organically and perfectly in that sense. And are you enjoying it? You're what, like 60 episodes in or something?
Yeah. Yeah, I just released 62.
Nice.
Which is crazy. Like I'm already thinking about like episode 100, like should do something really special for that.
Yeah.
It's fun. I didn't think that I would have so many ideas. And like, you know, I've had moments where I'm like, I have no idea what to talk about next and, or like who to talk to. But there's always more ideas and there's always, you know, something that people need. But it's just really fun. And I've met like so many cool people like you and like been introduced to so many new shows. So I love the podcasting community.
Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, the people you meet are so cool. I mean, there's, you know, you meet every now and then some weirdos, but that's fine. I like that too. It's part of the experience, and it's just not, I like all humans, right? I mean, I don't necessarily want to hang out with all humans, but I like just learning and talking to them and listening to people's ideas about things, and just being able to, you know, give, like for me, like what's huge about was for me in doing this was like, I wanted to give people a place where they can talk about whatever they want to talk about and have no filter and no judgment and I'm not arguing with people, right? Like I'm not here to do anything except listen and ask good questions as best as I can, and just expose people to, expose the world to some amazing people, right? And have great conversations along the way. And it's, I can totally relate. It's a really cool platform, and it's exciting how big it's become, right? A little bit intimidating, but, you know, just the podcasting world is huge. And so it's like, whoa, there's some serious people in this space, but it's cool. I mean, it doesn't disappoint, and the point that you reach where you're like, I don't know what to do next, it's like, yeah, but something will happen and it'll be right, you know. And in your field, I'm sure, like, well, the addiction science is not a, you know, done field. It's not like they know everything, so there's always going to be new stuff coming out that you can talk about, and, you know, new theories or new studies or new people to talk to, or new substances that will come through. And I mean, you know, this whole world of psychedelics will be interesting to see how that pans out for people with the genetics, and whether it can help some people, hurt some people, something in between, you know, who knows? Like it's such a fascinating world. And yeah, I mean, so just like, you know, we've only got a few minutes left, so I just was wondering, like, what kind of advice would you give to someone who's, let's say, was in your shoes before you got sober? Someone who was like, I'm in a real tough place. I don't know how to get out, but I sort of need to do something. Or I don't know if I formulated that question so good, but you know what I mean?
Yeah, I do. So I had started listening to sober podcasts, and I had started being in sober Facebook groups while I was still drinking and while I was pursuing moderation. And I believed that I was, you know, I'm different from everybody else. I'm going to figure it out. And I think if you're listening to this and you're questioning your drinking, like, you're listening to it for a reason. And people who can drink socially and have that ability don't ever question that ability. It's just like who they are. And if you're questioning it, I would just keep listening to stuff like this. There's stuff on YouTube. There's like so many Facebook groups. If you just search the word sober, there's meetings that you can turn your camera off and like do a fake name. And the Instagram community is huge. Like, keep exposing yourself, and it doesn't click right away. Like, I started looking at sober stuff over a year before I did the 90 days even. Like, I didn't even realize like I actually belong there. Like, you don't make the connection that you're in a sober group like for a reason and you joined it intentionally.
Right.
So just keep like, right? Just keep exposing yourself to this stuff, and eventually like your mind's gonna make the connection. Like, alcohol prevents your mind from like realizing you shouldn't drink it.
Right. And do you think I think that's great advice, right? And it's true how we sort of compartmentalize a lot of the things that we do and don't integrate it properly at the time that it's happening. And yeah, like that. I mean, why would you join a group if you're not, if you have no, inclination that there's something there for you, you wouldn't even think about it, right? And so I guess, for someone who's thinking that, oh, it's like, this sounds like something I'm interested in, or I have some pull towards it, it's like, okay, follow that, see what happens, it might save you or something like that. And it's fantastic. And and also that the disease or the condition of addiction does prevent you from seeing things clearly for whatever reason, right? Do you know the neuroscientific part of that? Like, why, like, what blocks the ability to see?
Yeah, so there's a lot of reasons. I've seen it compared to, there's a term called anosognosia, something like that.
Anosognosia?
Yeah, that one. And it's when like someone with schizophrenia or someone with bipolar disorder or Alzheimer's or something, or the stroke victim, they don't think that there's anything wrong with them. And that's like annoying and frustrating, but that's actually their experience. Like, they're not being weird or annoying. They just like really don't think there's anything wrong with them. And I've seen like the denial that problem drinkers will have compared to that condition. And so alcohol damages like every single part of your brain, and the parts that take the biggest hit are the ones that help with judgment, impulse control, decision making, considering the future, like everything that matters in like analysis, emotional regulation,
right.
like that. So the front of the brain. And even though you can have the thoughts like, oh, I'm in a sober group, like you can't realize like, oh yeah, I'm here to moderate in the sober group where no one moderates. Like you can't actually make sense of your own experience. And it's just the nature of alcohol. It's not us. Like when someone stops drinking, 2 months in, they're going to have a burst of clarity. And that's because like your brain is recovering. And that's a shocking experience when like you finally see things for the first time. It's really exciting. So yeah, it's just alcohol. You can't like think correctly or like see what's going on or understand how you're feeling.
Yeah, that's a good comparison, because it's true. Like people with different, like mental illnesses and things like that. It's like it's like someone in an abusive relationship. You can tell them 1,000 times what's happening, but they just can't see it until they see it.
Yeah.
You can't convince them of what's happening, even if you're like, I can take a video and show you, and they'll be like, nah, it's not what you think, or that you come up with reasons to just justify your views to yourself, and it's a very strange thing, because it's funny because like we could be talking about this now, someone's listening and has that situation and will recognize the truth in what we're saying, but also still be stuck and not necessarily be able to do anything about it just yet, right?
Yeah, they're different.
Yeah, and like, to not me, like that's the definition for other people. But that's unfortunate. But I mean, you get past it, right? Like you can, as you say, like once you get sober, like things start to repair, and neuroplasticity is a wonderful thing, and our brains are designed to be able to, come back and fight back, and as much as possible, if possible. I suppose people who are real long way down the road and have been, an alcoholic for 30 or 40 years, like that's when it becomes a irreversible problem. But anyway, go to a group if anyone's interested. It's plenty of them online, Zoom calls, pandemic friendly, or listen to Sober Powered. But thank you very much for coming on the show today. I've really enjoyed this conversation, and I appreciate you and the work that you're doing. It's super important, and keep doing it. And I would love to have you on again at some point to talk more. I feel like we could talk for hours. If people want to find you and the show, where can they find it? I'll put the links in, but just to let people know.
Yeah, so my show is called Sober Powered, but if you search for Sober Powered anywhere, like I'm on YouTube, Instagram, I have a Facebook group that's very safe. So yeah, if you just search for it, you'll find me. If you are scared to go to a meeting, feel free to contact me, and I will go with you virtually to the meeting. That's what someone did for me, because I was even like 20 months in, I was too scared to go. So yeah, if you need a meeting buddy, I'm around.
Wow. Good. Thank you. I appreciate you. I will speak soon. Thanks for being on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
All right, take care.